In the modern age, many of us struggle with addictions and things of these sorts. Some examples could be scrolling on Instagram for hours on end, watching YouTube for hours, or playing video games. All of those things could be kind of put under the category of just screen addiction. But of course, there's addictions to drugs and many different kinds of things. Everyone kind of has their own sort of addiction and so on. Um, and I was kind of contemplating like why this is, um, and I just wanted to kind of share my insight with you. And if you watch this video, hopefully you'll learn a thing or two, and hopefully it can help you out. Essentially, I think it comes down. Well, of course, there are many different reasons, but one of the main reasons is that we tend to stay lukewarm. And I'm going to kind of explain what I mean by this. So you could think of it kind of as there's hot, there's cold, and there's lukewarm. And in this analogy, being hot, for example, would be being extremely active, being extremely productive, being extremely dynamic. You're working a lot, you're striving towards your goals, you're doing productive things, being active. Being cold is essentially being idle, not doing much. You're essentially not doing anything. And lukewarm is essentially where it's tricky because it can sound like being lukewarm is actually being balanced. But you're not doing too much and you're not doing too little. And of course, balance is the most important. But in this instance, I wouldn't say that lukewarm is being balanced. It's pseudo balance, essentially. And this is where you're not actually doing anything productive, but you're still doing something which makes you feel like you're being productive, at least to your brain. Right. So, for example, when you're watching YouTube or you're scrolling on Instagram, just watching reels on reels, yeah, you may be gaining a little bit of information or whatever, but our human brains aren't even really designed to take in that much information that fast. So, a lot of it is just essentially junk. Like, if you look at your email or whatever, it's almost like junk mail. It's not really like maybe 10 or 20% of what you consume is actually useful and productive, and most of it is just noise, right? And you're not really doing anything, you're not really achieving anything, but to your brain, it feels like you're doing something. It feels like you're being productive, right? When you're playing video games, you're not really achieving anything, but it feels like you're doing something. When you're scrolling on Instagram, watching reels, you're not really doing anything or achieving anything, but it feels like you are, right? And what I explained earlier with being hot and cold, it may sound like I'm saying that you should always be hot, that you should always be being productive and so on and so forth. And being cold, for example, is wrong. You should never be idle and so on. But that's actually not what I'm saying. What I'm suggesting is that you should actually try to either be hot or cold and kind of oscillate between the two. So we can't always be idle. Like, we have to do things to survive. We have to be productive and so on. But overproductivity is also a negative because it can lead to burnout and so on and so forth. So being on either extremes indefinitely is also imbalanced, right? But being lukewarm isn't the solution because you're not really, even though you're not being productive, you're not even being completely idle either. So you're not even getting the benefits of being idle and perhaps meditating and reflecting and so on, because you're still kind of being distracted from all this input from the game or from the Instagram reels or from the drugs that you're taking or whatever. You're still being distracted. So you're not even getting the benefits of being productive or the benefits of being idle and resting and recuperating and so on. You're getting the benefits of neither, but it feels like you're being balanced. It feels like you're, essentially it feels like you're being balanced, but it's a pseudo balance. So essentially what I was kind of, let me give you some examples as well. So these are just kind of crude examples, but for example, being lukewarm, as I said before, would be just watching YouTube, I don't know, just smoking weed, scrolling on Instagram, playing video games, these kind of things where you're not really doing anything productive, but to your brain, it feels like you're doing something, right? Whereas being hot would be kind of like, as I said, these are just kind of gross examples. Just being at the gym, for example, or being at work, or being creative, doing something that's actually where you actually get a return for the energy that you're expending, essentially. And being on the idle side could be, for example, meditation, silence, or just sleeping, just actual regeneration, right? And there's benefits to being hot and to being cold, but there's not really any benefits to being lukewarm. So, as I said earlier, I would suggest we try to, because this is something that I'm going to try and implement myself as well, is that we try to oscillate between being on and off, or being hot and cold, right? You try to oscillate between these two. Either you're actually doing something, when you're doing something physical, you're actually trying to do something productive, something that will actually give you a return on investment of your time and energy, right? Or if you're actually not doing anything, actually don't do anything. Actually just sit in silence in meditation. Actually just be idle, rather than not doing anything, but then, because this is also something I wrote in my notes, is that when you're being lukewarm, it's like you're procrastinating doing the kind of hot or the actual productive stuff. So there may be something that you should be doing, but you're avoiding that by doing this lukewarm stuff. And simultaneously, you're avoiding the guilt that is being created by not doing the productive things, by making yourself feel like you're doing something when you're actually not doing anything, right? So really, if you're actually being active and doing something, it should actually be something that's going to either enhance your situation, help in your survival, perhaps better your position in your career, or as I say, it doesn't have to always be about money, but enhancing your creativity, expanding your intelligence, or so on. Which, of course, yes, YouTube and these things can do to some degree, but if you're being honest with yourself, probably only a third or 20% of that is kind of YouTube. What you're watching is actually expanding your knowledge and so on, and a lot of it is just noise. So you can get those benefits from YouTube and so on, or from Instagram or whatever, by consuming them in a much more limited kind of manner, rather than the way in which you're consuming it now. So when you're actually being active, it should actually be something productive. And when you're not being productive, which is fine, you shouldn't always be productive. But let's say you've gone out, you've worked, you went to the gym, you did this today, you did that today, and then you're at home, then actually just sit in silence and meditate and reflect. Don't come home and then start doing all this lukewarm stuff where it feels to your brain like you're being even more productive, but actually you're just being lukewarm, and it's at the detriment of your recovery for perhaps the next day, for all that other productive stuff that you have to do. And so it's taken away from the recovery of that, and it's also giving you this false feeling that you're being more productive than you actually are. You see? So this is essentially the whole point of the video, is to try and avoid being lukewarm, where you're not doing, you're not really doing anything productive, but you feel like you are, by using these, and that's really where the addictions come in. Is it's just these things that you keep on looping back to, things that you do to kind of fill the void of the emptiness and the silence and the boredom that naturally occurs when you stop being active. Um, but that void and that emptiness can actually be a pleasant experience if you accept it and you actually just meditate. And essentially, this is something that I've realized as well when I do my meditations, is that when I actually sit with my eyes closed, I don't get bored. Like it's nearly impossible for me to be bored when I'm actually meditating, right? But when I'm sitting doing nothing, but my eyes are still open, like my body still thinks it's in an active mode, but I'm actually not doing anything, then I get bored. But if I actually like kind of own it and say, all right, cool, this is just a dedicated moment, like the next hour or two, I'm just actually going to be idle, right? And then you actually just sit with your eyes closed, then kind of accepting that emptiness that comes with just silence and solitude can actually be a pleasant and blissful experience. Whereas if you're just kind of in the silence and solitude, but your eyes are still open, your mind is still kind of in that active mode, then you're gonna naturally want to do something which would kind of fall in this lukewarm category, to where you're just gonna start kind of scrolling just to look at something. Because think, when your eyes are open, you want to naturally look at something. And in the past, you would have just been looking at nature and all of this stuff. But now with this modern technology, you have you have access to too many things which are actually detrimental to you, but that are kind of, that feel pleasurable to engage in, right? And that's what kind of leads to these addictions. So yeah, I hope that was helpful. Let me know what you thought of that.